And welcome into the Tuesday edition, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/getitall. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home with a $99 yearly Beehive membership where the buzz is always about great service. Joe Rexrode, salutations. How we doing? What's going on?
Doing okay. How we doing?
Doing fantastic. Keyser, how we doing? How's life?
Hey, doing well. Got some energy this morning. Well rested. Ready to go.
That's good. Got a lot to get into on the program today. Alex Doherty from the Tennessean will be with us later this hour at 6:45. We're going to have a large Nashville Predators discussion today on Andrew Burnett, where this thing is headed, and just the standpoint of closing out this season and the decisions that are coming up for Barry Trotz, for Andrew Burnett, for everybody. So a lot of people have weighed in on this when I threw it out on Twitter yesterday, and looking forward to everybody's participation throughout the show as well. We'll take your thoughts all show long, 615-737-1025. We will get into some NFL Combine stuff and NFL free agency stuff later in the show as well. We'll have the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode at 7:45, so a lot to get into on the program here today. So, Joe, let's just get started. The Predators are in action tonight, taking on the Florida Panthers. They're in a run right now, and we talked about it coming out of the break where their schedule is just ridiculous in terms of the quality of teams that they're playing right out of this break, and it's the reigning Cup champs tonight. They got Winnipeg, who apparently doesn't lose anymore, coming up on Thursday. So there's been a lot of losing that's taken place. They've got some tough games coming up. They are 30th in the league right now, 4 points back of the Buffalo Sabres, and they're 6 points ahead of Chicago right now. So they're kind of squarely stuck at 30th at the moment, and they've been in that spot or near that spot for a large portion of this season. So naturally, Joe, it leads to what's going to happen here. What are the decisions you can make in the offseason to change this thing around? We've talked about Andrew Burnett specifically a lot this year, particularly back towards the beginning of the year in November, into December, where it was clear that the season was going off the rails, and a lot of fans were screaming for Andrew Burnett to be fired and for the Predators to move on from him as head coach and to make a different decision. Barry Trotz, it felt like, Joe, was asked about Andrew Burnett's job status with Stillman like every week for a long stretch of time where his weekly interviews. Eventually that stopped. Trotz made the decision to stick with Andrew Burnett for the season. He said a few weeks ago that Andrew Burnett's not going to get fired at any point in the season. So with that kind of in the backdrop here, the question then becomes, what happens at the end of the year in a season that we all know is about to be lost? They're 56 games into it. They're going nowhere in terms of the playoffs. They're not going to approach the playoffs this year. So what happens at the end of all of this thing when you're evaluating where things went wrong, how things went wrong, and probably most importantly, Joe, how you fix it moving forward? So as we sit here today, how do you view Andrew Burnett, his job status at the end of this season, and where you think things might be headed here when this thing comes to an end for the regular season?
I look at it sort of like a 50-50 thing. I mean, I can see it going either way. Like you said earlier in the year, if you're going to do something like that, the idea is, well, I mean, first of all, that's who you blame. You have to have a pretty fair amount of blame for the coach, and then you're doing it to try to, turn things around. And we have seen this happen. I mean, right now we're watching the Detroit Red Wings fight for a playoff spot when they were definitely not in that position before they fired their coach this year. I mean, that happens in the league. But once you get past a certain point, as you said, you're gonna probably see it to the end. Now it comes down to, I mean, I think you can make a strong case to move on. But also, I mean, Barry Trotz has expressed belief in Andrew Burnett. It's been just 2 years. One of them was good. I still think, I think that a lot of his career to date is he's a I mean, I think he's a promising young coach. Is he the right coach for this group? I think is one of the big questions. It's like when he was hired, the idea was young coach growing with young team, and then the GM made it young coach with very old accomplished team. So does he not fit with this group anymore?
Yeah, I think that's a huge question. It's been interesting the way the roster has shaken out here. And look, I think today, in terms of this discussion, that's open too. Like getting into the roster and where things have gone here with how this team has been constructed, and what that most importantly means moving ahead here. Like, is this a situation where no matter who the coach is, this has just become an older team that their best days of hockey are behind them, and we're seeing a team that is collectively on the downturn. Now, look, I understand, you could throw that idea out there. I understand if you're a Predators fan listening to this and you're looking around and saying, so wait a minute, you expect me to believe that Jonathan Marchessault, Stamkos, Brady Shea, your big three that you got this offseason, are all falling off at the same time. And you combine that with like Yossi having a bad year. I mean, the goalie's a little bit different, but we've talked about him. I mean, at the end of the day, I don't think it really matters who your coach is with a goalie. Like, your job is to stop the puck. So there is that. But you've got Yossi having a bad year. You got Forsberg, who is definitely not having a bad year, but he approached 50 goals last year. He's not going to approach that this year. You have Nyquist, who, quite frankly, I think the drop in production from him this year was predictable heading into it. It has superseded what I thought it would be. Like, it's been, as I think Willie put it well yesterday, everything that went well for him last year has gone equally as poorly for him this year. Like, it's been amazing, the turnaround in production for Gus Nyquist. So I understand if you're a Predators fan, you're saying, wait a minute. So are we supposed to believe that every single one of these guys have just completely fallen off the table at the same time? Or do you look at the coach and you say, why is this not working better? And is he to blame for all these guys falling off at the same time? I think it's a little bit more complicated than that. I think there's some of both that you have to point to here from a roster construction standpoint and a coaching standpoint. But here's where I fall on the Andrew Brunette stuff, and we're going to get to this throughout the hour. Back in November when we had this discussion, Joe, and fans were screaming about Andrew Brunette, and they were screaming about how the Predators should move on from him and try to save the season. My thought was, he's demonstrated to be a pretty good coach. I understand he took over an incredibly talented roster in Florida when he was the interim, but he did help navigate that team through a very tumultuous situation to the President's Trophy that year and got to the second round of the playoffs. Last year started off pretty rocky for the Predators, and he navigated that team through it, and they eventually got to the point where they played great in the second half of the year, had a decent showing in the playoffs, and you felt good about where things were headed. In November, you're talking about a month and a half of bad hockey that I didn't think had the chance to outweigh the good that we had seen with Andrew Brunette. My thought on it now, Joe, is like at some point along the way here, he needs to have proven that he can fix this mess. And I don't think he's done that this year. Now, I'm not saying that he totally can't, but this is basically 56 games at this point of the same stuff. Like, they can't score. They haven't been able to score all year with the exception of about a 3-week span from early January to late January. They have not been able to defend well all year. And this is, I mean, we talked about it when we were talking about UC Saros. This is how you end up 30th in the league, when you're doing a lot of things really poorly. The power play has not been as effective as it should be with the names that they've got on paper. And I think at some point, if you're going to save your job, like, you've got to prove that you've got an idea to fix this heading into next year. And I don't know that he's done that to this point.
Yeah, no, I think that's totally fair. Now, I think that if it's comes down to like this just is what it is from a roster perspective, like it's not essentially not fixable, then first of all, what you said, that means that just a bunch of people have just fallen off at the same time. It's terrible luck, but also it's more about the roster construction than it is about the coaching. But I'm with you. Obviously they've had these tiny little brief glimpses of life, but obviously not nearly enough. Another thing to point out on his behalf is that great season that Nyquist had was with him in his system. Forsberg that he had was with him in his system. So some of these guys have played very high level hockey, even relative to their careers under Andrew Brunette. It just none of it this year. It has happened though.
Yeah, like you're right. Like a lot of it. We were having this conversation last year about the trajectory of this team when the season ended. I think you felt great about where things were going, right? Like the team overachieved. Forsberg put up, darn near 50 goals. Yossi had a great second half of the year last year. Like there's a lot to feel really good about. And it's been a disaster from the opening puck drop this year. Like that's what it's been. Like from the time they began the season until now, it's been one long nightmare for the Predators this year. And I said it yesterday, like it is, you can feel it when you walk in there now. Like it is taking a huge toll on these guys the way that this thing has gone. I think it's taken a huge toll on Andrew Brunette the way that this thing has gone. And they just all we've reached the point, Joe, and I think, you can make the argument you've been to this point for a while, but like it just kind of feels like nobody has an answer. Like there's no real answer as to why or how they've gotten to this point. And look, sometimes sports are weird, right? Sometimes you just have weird bad seasons and for whatever reason they're unexplainable and you come back the next year and you play well. That does happen in sports. Quite frankly, that happens in this sport kind of frequently. Like it's a thing that does happen. But I think with the age of the roster and the fact that we're sitting here today 56 games in and it just feels like it's been the same team all year long, it's a huge red flag. And I'm interested to see how Predators fans are going to view that today. So we've set the table for the Andrew Brunette conversation. I'll throw it open to the roster as well. How much of this is on Brunette? How much of this is on the roster? And probably most importantly, what's the plan of action if you're the Predators moving forward? We'll take your thoughts on all that. 615-737-1025 is our phone number. We welcome your phone calls throughout the day as well. We'll get to all things Nashville Predators for the first hour of the show. Alex Doherty will be with us later in the program. We'll get into some NFL Combine, NFL free agency talk later in the program in the 7 o'clock hour. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Tune in later today to 94.9 The Fan for Vanderbilt baseball as the Commodores host Tennessee Tech. Pregame beginning at 4:15. First pitch is at 4:30. Coverage also available on the 94.9 The Fan app and at 94.9thefan.com. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. Taking your thoughts on the Predators, 615-737-1025. Our phone number, 615-737-1025. Look, we all know that this season is lost for the Predators. They're not going to the playoffs. There's going to be some level of a sell-off that begins here shortly before the NHL trading deadline, and we'll see exactly how active the Predators are. And then you get into a bunch of decisions that are going to have to be made, both the rest of this year and into the offseason, of how do you fix this moving forward? How do you get back to a place next season where you're competitive, you're back in the playoffs, and you're a team that you felt like maybe you were heading into the season? That's a tough question to answer right now based on the way this season has gone. What is it going to mean for Andrew Brunette? I think that's probably short-term, Joe, the most immediate decision that the Predators are going to have to make. There's going to be a point, when we get pretty shortly into the offseason, that Barry Trotz is going to have to make a decision on his coach moving forward. And here's kind of where I come down on as we sit here today, Joe. Like I said last segment, some point along the way here, I think you have to demonstrate that you have what it takes to fix this. And to this point, I don't think that he has. My opinion on Andrew Brunette really hasn't changed all that much from what we discussed in November. Like, I think Andrew Brunette's a bright guy. I think he's a good coach. I think he's going to be a good coach in the National Hockey League. Having said that, Joe, like, I'm also well aware that good coaches in the National Hockey League get fired all the time. Like, they get fired all the time in the NHL. And this is, as we've discussed, the league that is the quickest of all of them to fire the coach. It happens all the time in this league. And I look at where they're at right now. Yeah, they've got some cap space that they've been able to kind of weasel together here and create. Yeah, they've got some options potentially with some of the assets they have and first-round picks to tinker with the roster and maybe make a trade or two this offseason. And maybe you can change the setup, the structure of the team enough to where it's different heading into next year. But I don't think there's a lot you can do. Like Stamkos is going to be back. Marchessault is going to be back. And, unless you do something dramatic, like Forsberg and Yossi are going to be back. Brady Shea is going to be back. So a lot of your big money guys are going to be here, and you got to find a way to make it work. And I don't think you can get rid of all of them. You may not be able to get rid of any of them. And usually the coach is the one to pay the price when that happens, Joe. So, like, if the season ended today, my expectation would probably be that Andrew Brunette will not be the coach next year. That's just kind of where I fall on it today. I know how this league works. It's been a rough year, and I feel like if that's how if it continues to go this way and there's not substantial progress, and really at this point, Joe, you could argue when you're getting close to game 60 of the season, what would now define substantial progress moving forward? I think he's in a really tough spot to be back as head coach next year.
Yeah, I think I would wonder. I would wonder, like, what. I mean, I guess the answer would just be winning, but I would wonder, like, what can he do the rest of the way? Play well, have the team play well, which then everyone will be mad because they're going to mess up their pick,
There's that.
But, but I mean, all you can do is coach the team right now and try to keep them zoomed in on the details and blocking shots and doing the little things that you have to do to try to win games. I mean, obviously Barry Trotz has a coach's eye. Barry Trotz coached long enough in this league that he's been a part of every kind of season as a coach. So, he knows what he's looking at. I think two things are key here. One, when Barry Trotz moved on from John Hines, Hines kind of twisted in the wind for a while there. But, as some of the talk, okay, so what if he does move on from John Hines? What's the move? I mean, is there someone in mind? Is there a system in mind?
Right.
I know some people have thrown out Joel Quenneville. I'd have a problem with that, given what happened with the Cal Beat situation. But that's a mentor, and basically the same system. You'd have system consistency. Maybe you don't want that though, right? So one, do you have someone in mind? And two, I mean, I think I take really seriously like what the players think, especially the veterans. You know, are the veterans, when you have exit interviews, are they fighting for this guy, speaking on his behalf? Or are they, I mean, I'm sure you're not going to get a lot of like, please fire this guy. But, you know, there's a difference between, no, I really believe in Andrew Burnett and, you know, and what we're doing, and ABC happened and it's not his fault, or sort of, you know, shrug your shoulders. And, you know, that are people impassioned in fighting on his behalf when it comes to the veterans and stars on this team? I mean, I think that's their feedback is important.
Well, I think their feedback is important, but I also think like one of the ways that you show that you're impassioned in defense of your coach is to help him fix it on the ice, and they just can't do it. Like they've not been able to do it, and it really hasn't mattered, Joe, like the circumstance. Like they've gone through some different stretches this year where they've played better than others. You wondered maybe with this Four Nations break, if they came back, like could the break, the reset do them some good? Not from the standpoint of making the playoffs, because they dug themselves such a hole before this Four Nations break that it was going to be darn near impossible. But like, could you come back and play better? And look, I know they beat Colorado 2-1 on Saturday. I mean, they got doubled up in shots in that game. Kind of felt like they were holding on for dear life at the end of the game. And then you get beat 5-0 the other night against New Jersey. And, you know, we'll see what they do tonight. But this feels like the exact same team that I'm watching now that we were watching in October. And that's not good. Like, for Burnett, I think you'd love to be able to point to an area right now where it's like, all right, we feel like that has gotten a lot better, right? Well, the defense, and I know they've shaken some things around, right? Like they've had some injuries. I think they've used 13 different defensemen this year. It's been a rough year on defense. Right now, they are a bad defensive team. I mean, they gave up like 5 breakaways the other night. They're a bad defensive hockey team right now. Offensively, they've been a bad team all year. I mean, they've been shut out 8 times. They have, you know, a loaded roster on paper in terms of accomplished goal scorers. They can't score. The young guys, right? That, you know, it's like, okay, well, maybe the veterans are having a tough year. You worry about your roster getting old, but at least you've got some younger guys developing. Well, it's like, well, LaRue's hurt and he's been fine. Luke Evangelista has battled through injuries this year, but he's not done hardly anything this year. Like there's not a lot to point to with the young guys right now either. Like Novak's not really a young guy, but he's had an awful year based on what the expectations for him heading into the year. There's almost nothing. And I'm not trying to be hyperbolic when I say that, Joe. There's almost nothing right now to point to looking at this team where you just say, yeah, I feel great about that right now.
Right, and then it gets into kind of like some of the discussions we've had about with the Titans, with Vrabel and J-Rob, who did, you know, I mean, for example, so Novak, I mean, you know, you were like, man, really? When they extended him, right?
Yes.
So is that Brunette more like pushing for him, or is that Trotz misreading him? It's probably a combination, but it's stuff like that have led to this team where you start getting into coach and GM.
Yeah. Like, look, I certainly in this discussion do not want to absolve Barry Trotz of blame here. Now, having said that, I'm not going to sit here today and act like I didn't think he did a great job this offseason, because I did, right? Like when he signed Stamkos, Marchessault, and Brady Shea all in one day, I was just as excited as anybody else, right? Like I was like, wow, look at him. He's gone out. They've been aggressive in free agency. He has given this team some goal scoring help, and he did so without giving up any future assets. So, like, I'm not going to sit here today on February 25th and act like that was like some horrendous decision that he made at the time, because I didn't think that. Like, I thought it was a great move. It has not worked out to this point. Now, then the question has to become, that's when you get back into coaching. Like, how much of that is on the coaching and how much of that is on these guys and Marchessault, Stamkos, and Shea specifically are just like all falling off at the same time. Like I mentioned the stat on Stamkos yesterday. He hadn't had a point in 9 games. It's the longest of his career, and he hadn't had more than a 5-game streak without a point since like the second month of his career, which, by the way, is an unbelievable stat. Like it's crazy, and he's been around since 2008. Been around a long time, so it's just like we talked about at the time when they signed him. Like he's probably not Steven Stamkos that he was 2 years ago. He may not give you 40 goals again, but could he give you 30? Could he give you 35? Like you'd live with that. You'd love that if you're the Predators. And I don't think he's going to approach that. Like there's just everything. It feels like everything right now with this team that could have broke poorly for them this year has done so. And sometimes it's what it is, right? Like it's a tough break of a year and things go wrong, but you gotta attempt to find a root cause of that if you can.
Yeah. And listen, you're right. Everybody went gaga over the big signings, but Novak, there's one that
Yes,
was not the case. And Soros,
correct.
this program was against that signing, and right now that doesn't look great. But the first matter of business is definitely the coach at this point.
615-737-1025. Our phone number is 615-737-1025. We want to hear from you, Predators fans. We got a lot of your thoughts on the text line. Keep them coming. Give us a call, 615-737-1025. Your thoughts on Andrew Brunette and the future of the Predators moving forward. More coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Taking your thoughts on the Preds, 615-737-1025. Let's head to our 1025 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Frank to the program. Frank, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I just want to say I would love to hear the way Andrew Burnett talks to the locker room. If it's anything like the way he talks to the media, I have no hope for the rest of the season or next season if he's a coach. If he gets up there after every game, win or lose, and says, yeah, we played a great game. I think it's punches didn't bounce our way. Like, you lost 5-0. You didn't play a great game. And then he says he just has no idea what's going on. Like, that's your job. You are the only guy who is supposed to know what's going on and how to fix it. And it just drives me crazy. And I personally think he should have been fired way earlier, because clearly his message has gone stale. Clearly it's not working. I mean, I'm just hopeless, honestly.
Thanks for the call, Frank. Appreciate it. Look, the one thing I'll say about Andrew Burnett, I think he's pretty honest when he gets up there. Like, I do not – he does not get up there after every game and is like, yeah, we played great. He usually is pretty quick to point out how upset he is about something after game. Now, he did say the other night after they lost 5-0 that he liked a lot of things that they did offensively, which did not go over well with Pred's Twitter. I understand what he was saying.
Big Joe lost it on that one.
Yeah, like they have – I understand. They got beat 5-0. So you're never going to win over the fan base when you talk about that after the game. I get that. His point was they had the puck a lot, which they did, and they had a lot of offensive looks, which they did. But I understand nobody cares about that when you get beat 5-0. So I get that. The message going stale thing, I think is probably one of the most overrated things in the National Hockey League. Like, how often does that really happen? It does happen. Like, we talk about that with Peter Laviolette. I don't know that I think that Andrew Burnett's message has gone stale. What I wonder, Joe, right now is like, is his style, his coaching, his system, all those things, is it the right fit for this roster? It's hard to come away with the answer to that being yes, based on the way this season has gone. Now, I guess the question then becomes, all right, if you're Barry Trotz and Andrew Burnett, as you're having your exit meetings this offseason, like, is there tinkering that you can do throughout the course of an offseason where you're changing up the way you operate, where he can still be the head coach next year and you're just doing things a little bit differently than maybe he's used to fit this roster? I don't know. Typically, when you start to get into those discussions, Joe, it's probably just better off to change the coach and bring somebody else in who does something differently.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, look, like the caller there, it's not. I get it. When a team's losing, you don't want to hear any positive feedback. But I feel like Burnett just calls balls and strikes after games.
He's a pretty straight shooter. Yeah.
There are games in hockey where you get shut out or you have a terrible offensive night and you had 12 primo looks. And there have been games where they've scored goals where he didn't like their game as much. I mean, it's just. But you get to losing and people are going to focus on anything that, that infuriates them. So you better not say anything positive. And I get it. After a 5-0 loss, you don't want to hear anything but fire and brimstone. But yeah, I don't think that's an accurate reflection, but it's also what happens when you lose, like we talk about all the time, whatever your personality traits are, Vrabel, Mr. Tough, gritty guy, when they're winning, and then when they're losing, Mr. Neanderthal with his 1983 football, or Clark Lee, super nice guy, and they're losing. It's like, this guy is just he just walking on the sideline clapping, and now it's like, look at this new age coach, and they're winning. I mean, it's how it goes. You win, and your personal attributes are positive. You lose, and they all of a sudden they're all flaws. But yeah, to your point, if you get to that, then I think it's over. And so much of this too is like, I just have to believe that I think Trotz has tried not to micromanage. I know he's talked about that, right? He's a coach. I think sometimes he probably misses coaching. He's a all-time great coach. He also has been a coach and knows what good general manager relationships are. So he's tried to like not micromanage, not be too much in the kitchen,
Right.
but also that they have to be on the same page of all the stuff that Brunette's doing, right?
I would think so.
Yeah. So, I mean, like Trotz probably has a much more, I would think, like sympathetic view of a lot of things than than the outside world, but even then probably a lot of GMs would, I would think, based on his history, which makes the decision even more interesting.
On the, we're going to get a lot of, as this goes on and we approach the end of the regular season, as we continue to have conversations of Andrew Burnett, I've already heard from people who have said this. We're going to hear from more people who say it, and I just can't get there. Like, they're going to say, go hire Carl Taylor, like Carl Taylor, coach of the Admirals. Do I think Carl Taylor has done a great job in Milwaukee? Yes. Do I think that Carl Taylor probably deserves at some point to be a head coach in the NHL? Yes. I don't think this roster, with the way it's constructed right now, with the amount of veterans you've got on this team, I don't think this roster needs a first-time head coach. I think if you're going to make a change this offseason, I think you need to go get somebody who's got some skins on the wall and has done it before. Like that's what I would say. Who that is, I don't know. People are going to be screaming for Joel Quenneville. You talked about that earlier. There's going to be coaches at the end of this regular season that shake loose, and we see the recycling in this league all the time. Generally speaking, I'm not a huge, the recycling can work. I kind of like bringing some new blood in. I like that with Andrew Burnett when they hired him. Spencer Carberry in Washington has done a great job. Like, there's some pretty recent examples of new head coaches coming in and doing well. But like, I think with the veterans on this roster, you probably need somebody who's got some skins on the wall. That's just my initial take on it if it gets to that point.
No question. Yeah, I mean, I think one thing this league does, it recycles coaches, and there are coaches with significant achievement behind their name that that you can get. But again, that's part of the thing to me is like, if this move is going to be made, I gotta think, and I would hope that it would be made in tandem with already your next move in mind.
Right.
Rather than got to just fire and then let's just see how it goes.
Right.
But I think for sure that you're right that like you have to have a coach who has done some significant winning in this league as your next coach if you're going to move on from him.
We'll be joined by Alex Doherty from the Tennessean coming up next. We'll get his thoughts on the Andrew Burnett situation, the status of these Nashville Predators for the rest of the season, and how to fix it moving forward. We'll get into some NFL free agency at 7 o'clock. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keys are here with you on this Tuesday morning. We head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. And welcome in our friend Alex Doherty, who covers the Nashville Predators for the Tennessean. Alex, good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are y'all doing?
Doing great, man. Appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning. So we've had large discussion on Andrew Burnett and the future of the Nashville Predators this morning. So, Alex, I'll start there. How do you view the decision coming up here for the Preds? We know this season is lost and the playoffs are going to be way far in the rearview mirror by the time this thing is all said and done. And then the question is going to begin of how do you fix this moving forward? So where do you come down on that? And where do you come down on the future for Andrew Burnett and what that could look like after this season?
I don't know what you're talking about. Their playoff chances are about 0.2%. I think they got a chance. I think they need to go win about 20 games in a row, and they're right in there. They got them right where they want them. Is what's going to happen.
They're not 0.0.
They're not. So you're telling me there's a chance.
They are not eliminated. So here's how I think about this. We've been thinking a lot about this over the last. There was that time in December or whatever it was when there was really some thought that it was going to happen soon, and then Barry Trotz comes out and says, "Nope, he's my guy, he's my coach, we're good." And then at that point, it's like, well, I mean, there's no point in firing him now because you just kind of play out the season. But I do think that there's a conversation to be had as you guys have been having it, and for me, I always think about this like kind of like the scales of justice, like the two sides of the scale, and if a coach or a general manager, whoever it is, has more facts in their favor, then they're safe. But obviously the scales sort of get adjusted, for a first-year coach or maybe even a second-year coach. But I just think that the scales are really starting to tip against Burnett here, and I would have to point to a lot of things. I would think, just the general kind of sense of this season, that literally every single player is having a bad season. I mean, you can't point to a single player and think, oh, look, that player, he's having a career year. You could do that with John Hines. Remember the season before John Hines was fired, Matt Duchene and Phil Forsberg, they had great seasons, and that was a big, thing in favor of John Hines. Well, look, this was a bad season, but he did do some good things. I don't think you can say that about anything this season. I mean, every single player has been poor. And then, you had this off season of adding these offensive players that just not only didn't help, it seems to have hurt. I mean, they lost offense by adding some really good offensive players. You had questionable handling of Philip Tomasino and Dante Fabro, who are now off being successful in their new teams. You had the weird situation with Marchessault earlier. Although, I might give Burnett some credit there because I think right after that, Marchessault went on a nice little tear. So maybe that's in his favor. But and honestly, maybe perhaps the most damning thing is the poor goaltending. I mean, I think there's a pretty common adage that bad goaltending can get coaches fired, and I think. Whereas I think the situation with Saros is maybe a little bit more insulated than just like it's a coaching situation. That kind of thing, the badness, the how poor Saros has been this year is just, it's too much to just say, oh, well, he had a bad year. Like there has to be something else going on, right? That's kind of where I'm at. I mean, I just think that the scales are tipping against him now.
I will quickly point out that last year, Gus Nyquist did have his career year under Andrew Burnett. So it's almost like, in fact, it's funny that you brought up the Duchene thing, because it's actually kind of the same thing, right? A year before this happened, all these good things happened the year before. So, does that count for him now? Yeah, everything you say makes sense there, Alex. Do you feel like these players, if these, and again, it's not going to be like this, like Trott's going to be like, okay, Roman, should I fire him or not? Of course, it's not going to be like that. But do you think that these players, if they were, if given truth serum, would speak on his behalf, against him, or neutral?
I think if you ask them honestly, I think most would probably say that this is not working. I mean, I don't know that it's like a personal thing. I think it's like a strategy, tactical side. Like, I think that there's probably some, and you got a little bit of this earlier in the season. Remember when Steven Stamkos, kind of walked the line and was like, I could say some things about this right now. There was a pretty strong vibe that he was talking about the coaching side of it, or at least that he was talking about kind of the general tactics that were going on with how they were trying to fix the offense. I think if they're professional, they're not gonna say this, but I think that they would probably say, look, this offense is too complicated. This offense has too many moving parts that are not helping, and we need something different. We need a better setup, and players get the brunt of the blame for not scoring or for not doing specific things on the ice. But when you have this many all at once, kind of just like really struggling, the only solution seems to be coaching. And then there's like, well, okay, who would be the alternate? Who would you bring in instead? I mean, that's another conversation, but I don't know that there's an obvious solution there either. I mean, like, this is almost like a situation where the players would need to come up with something on their own to see if it works first, and then find the coach that worked for that. And that's not going to happen. I mean, like, Barry Trotz is not going to say, okay, the players, you come up with how you should make it work, and then we'll find a coach that can just be the rubber stamp at the top. Like, it's just kind of a mess. And then there's Barry Trotz is not blameless here. I mean, like, he came in and made a lot of changes and then spent a ton of money, and now has to think, okay, I mean, and then like pretty soon was like, well, that didn't work. Let's go to plan B. I mean, like 2 months into the season. and so that doesn't exactly work either. I mean, like, you can't just have this weird sort of like, well, I've got kind of 4 plans rolling all at once, and when one doesn't work, then I can just shift to another. So it's just all kind of a mess. I do think that one thing that won't happen that I've heard people talk about is Barry Trotz coming down from the rafters and saying, I'm going to be the coach now. I don't think that's going to happen. I think he's done there.
Well, okay. So to the point of the roster, like, the coach is going to be the first thing everybody talks about. And we've talked about that a lot today here on the show, but I guess, fundamentally beyond that, beyond the coach, how much of this is also like the roster, the age of the veteran core that they've got here at forward, and perhaps like those guys just not being a fit together. Like, one thing we talked about heading into the season was, they signed a bunch of these guys. The scoring should be a lot better. They still don't have any centers. Like, the idea that Tommy Novak is going to be a second line center heading into the year has always just been mystifying to me. So how much of this comes down to roster construction, regardless of who the coach is?
Yeah, I think you're definitely right there. I mean, they missed on. I think it's pretty clear that they wanted to get, Barry Trotz wanted to get a center. I think he was. I don't remember who he was talking to. It may have been on this station or somewhere else. But he was talking about how he had in mind to go get a certain kind of player and couldn't get him, and then had to go get someone else. But I think it's pretty clear he was going after someone like a Chandler Stevenson, a center, like a true center in the offseason, and then just couldn't get him. I mean, what if that had happened? What if they had gotten a true center to solidify the middle of the lineup? That is a big problem. I mean, like, they have had problems up the middle of the ice all season long, and then had to stick Steven Stamkos in the middle in order to just salvage something. So roster construction is a big problem. Yeah, I mean, and that's why I think Barry Trotz is not blameless here. But I do think that, based on my conversations with the team that I wrote about a little earlier this year, I think that they are just as happy with Barry Trotz now as they were when they first hired him to be the general manager. I don't think anything's changed there, especially because, like, he's been able to protect some things that they wanted to protect. The team has been terrible. He spent a lot of money that seems to be maybe a little bit reckless, but They like the fact that he's been able to hold all those draft picks. They like the fact that the team still has some top prospects that are up and coming. So I think if, in terms of the organization holds Barry Trotz in high esteem, even with the sort of questionable roster construction for this season.
Alex, you mentioned, I want to go back to what you mentioned about tactics. If I'm Andrew Burnett hearing that, I'm like, oh, you don't like these tactics? Go watch those Blackhawks teams that won the cups with these tactics. Tell me that these tactics don't work. But on that same point, if that's truly an issue and that's truly something that just it doesn't fit with these guys, it needs to be changed, then we have to get rid of the Joel Quenneville talk, right? I mean that I don't think it should be a thing anyway. But is that not the case? I mean, if tactics is truly a big part of this thing?
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, you don't want to get the guy who taught him how to do this. Now, I will say Burnett, he's not a clone of, in terms of obviously I'm talking about the hockey side of this, not the off ice stuff, but he's not a clone of Joel Quenneville. He definitely, he blends a lot of different things. When I talked to him about it, he credited, oh gosh, and now I'm blanking, New Jersey Devils coach for many years. Oh my gosh.
Well, he's with Lindy Ruff.
No, well, that one, the one that won all the cups. Oh my gosh, why can I think of this? Anyways, he's blended several different coaches over the years, and I don't think that his offense. I think his offense is tweaked, to his. I think he's doing his own thing, but yeah, I would not say. I mean, Joel Quenneville would be, I think, too much of a distraction, too much of a big problem, and I think Barry Trotz would need someone that could come in and immediately fix. Now, I know Robby was saying earlier about the Carl Taylor thing. I mean, I like Carl Taylor a lot, but I think it's pretty clear at this point his future in the NHL is going to be someone on some other team. It's not going to be with this team. He's been passed up too many times here. I would think that, think about this. The other thing is who could be available. Now we're getting way ahead of it, but if Andrew Burnett is fired, who could be available? There's a couple names that could be available. I mean, like, I don't know about the future of Rick Tocchet in Vancouver right now. Same thing with Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh. I mean, like, that wouldn't be. I mean, those are quality coaches that have shown that they can win and would bring a different element to the team. Gerard Gallant's another one. There are some other kind of maybe third tier, like Dave Haxtell, who, I mean, I don't think is that good of a coach, but I think it would be different. There's some other options out there, but yeah, the Quenneville option is just would not be a good one.
Alex, great stuff, man. Really appreciate you taking time to be with us this morning, and I will see you later. We'll talk to you later down the road.
That's right. I just wanted to say, Joe, I'm planning my trip to the NHL Combine in June.
Yes.
I know you love combines and exercising and push-ups and vertical leaps. There's going to be some excellent content up at the Buffalo, the NHL Combine in Buffalo. I have an extra seat and an extra hotel room if you would like to come with me.
At least send me all the video. I'll try to make it, but I want all the video clips of all the drills, at least. Thank you, sir.
Okay, all right. I'll send you hours of footage.
Alex Doherty, our guest here on the program. We'll take your thoughts on the Preds, 615-737-1025. We will switch gears as well coming up next. Get into some NFL free agency, NFL Combine, as Alex just mentioned, getting underway this week. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get it all. Robby Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. Appreciate Alex Doherty from the Tennessean for being with us in the last segment. The NFL Combine getting underway this week. The Titans will speak later today, so make sure you tune in to 102.5 The Game all day long for your coverage on that from the NFL Combine and what the Titans brass has to say. Joe, the next legitimately newsworthy period beyond the Combine will be NFL free agency. We are just a few weeks away now from NFL free agency getting underway. And it's interesting, your colleagues at The Athletic, Joe, have come out with their free agency rankings. They put their top 150 together, and they've tiered it up. It's kind of similar to the quarterback tier discussion that we have every offseason with the way that this has all come together here. Joe, there's a lot of free agents to sift through here, but your generally speaking reaction to this year's crop of free agents and what could be available to the Tennessee Titans out there.
Well, my general reaction is we've already talked about the good ones, and a few of them are good, but my goodness, does it seem like a weak free agent crop when you look at it? So, for example, obviously T. Higgins, that makes sense, as number one. We got Trey Smith number two. Now, I like Trey Smith a lot. Trey Smith is a very good player, and I think the Titans should be serious about Trey Smith. And I think if you can solidify the interior, again, as TD said last week, some people don't understand how important it is to be solid and sound in the interior of the offensive line. Yes, tackles make more. You can call that a premium position, but if you're bad at guard or if you're excellent at guard, there's a big difference in your football team. An interior pass rush is still the most effective. And if you have somebody you can actually, get to your quarterback from the interior, or a team that, has multiple people, that's just so problematic for an offense. But still, Trey Smith, number two free agent. I mean, we talked about Ronnie Stanley, kind of like, if the Ravens are letting him go, what is that? Okay. He's number three. So what it tells me is, look, when you get to Chris Godwin as number 5 after Eagles DT Milton Williams, you realize basically this free agency period is just a plan B free agency period. Again, though, I'm talking about the top tier, which would it also include Zach Bond and Josh. So Eagles galore.
Yeah.
Eagles who probably have inflated their value quite a bit galore, right? Like Josh Sweat is a good player, but someone's going to overpay him because of what he did this year, because of what they did this year. Zach Bond, incredible story. Is he going to go out there and get massive money now? He might. And is that overpaying him? Probably.
Yeah, it's not a great free agent crop. And, it's interesting. I was looking on this list to see where they would have, some of the quarterbacks. They got Darnold, I think, at 8. Rodgers coming in at 27th. So, first off, the hit that would take to Aaron Rodgers' ego, looking at this list, would be, it may make him play 5 more years. But Rodgers at 27, Justin Fields at 28.
Right behind him, by the way.
Yeah, like right behind him. Like then you get beyond that, and you get into like the Tevin Jenkins and Rasul Douglases of the world. It's not a great free agent crop. Now, Joe, I kind of view that the same way that I view a draft class, right? Like maybe you don't have a great draft class as a whole, but if you sign the right guys from the draft class, if you draft the right people, then it doesn't really matter what the rest of the class looks like to your team specifically. Like if you're the Titans, if you can identify some free agents on this list that fit your team and you could carve out a role for them that you feel like they could come in and play well for you, if you sign the right people, then it doesn't really matter what the whole class looks like as long as you sign the right ones. The problem is if you're a Titans fan and you're looking for the Titans still got quite a bit of money they're able to spend. If you're looking at this and thinking that you're going to have some franchise transformational players available to you in free agency this offseason, there ain't very many of those. And again, like the number one guy on this list is T. Higgins, who I don't think anybody really expects to be available out there.
Yeah, I would not call it a target-rich environment. You know, real quick, you mentioned Darnold is where Darnold's 8th.
Yes.
Hey, by the way, let's see, what year was Darnold drafted? 2018, right?
That sounds right.
Was he the number? He wasn't the first quarterback, was he? No, Baker was, right?
I believe so.
Did you know that Sam Darnold didn't throw at the combine?
Really?
I'd just like to throw that out there for anybody who, wants to make sweeping judgments around this time of year. Sam Darnold, fully healthy, decided not to throw at the combine, was not the top quarterback in the draft. How about that? Isn't that wild?
Listen to the first 4 quarterbacks taken in that draft. Baker at 1, Darnold at 3, Josh Allen at 7, and then our man Josh Rosen at number 10. What a wild swing of emotions from those 4.
Yeah, and boy, at that time, the one guy I was sure would be a total bust was Josh Allen. So, so there you go.
Then there's Lamar
Good.
at 32 that year in the draft.
Yeah, Lamar Jackson at the very end of the first round, by the way. My goodness.
Good stuff. 615-737-1025, our phone number. Your reaction, your thoughts on the Titans and NFL free agency. Plus, Joe, I've got somewhat of a hot take on a guy that I would like to see the Titans take a shot on in free agency this offseason. We'll get into that coming up next as well. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game, taking your thoughts on NFL free agency, the NFL Combine, all things Tennessee Titans, 615-737-1025. Let's head to our 102.5 The Game phone line, driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Adam in Portland. Adam, good morning. Thanks for calling in.
Joe, do you mean to tell me that Sam Darnold did not want to help himself?
I guess not. I guess Sam
Bro.
Darnold didn't want to compete. I guess he was
He
kind
didn't
of
wanna
afraid,
compete?
huh? I'd stay
Yeah,
away
I
from a
guess
guy
so.
like that.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't trust him. His head exploded when you said that because he has no rebuttal because he can't love them both. He always has it both ways, dude. Since 2017, he's been trying to have it both ways. Great job, Joe. I'm proud of you. Hey, y'all need
Thank
a
you.
fan rant segment for things like this. Also, Robby, did I catch yesterday that you're a Red Sox fan when you were talking about Johnny Damon? I only got pieces of that.
No, I mean, 10-year-old Robby enjoyed watching the Red Sox come back and beat the Yankees, and I was, I guess, a Red Sox fan at that time because all my friends like the Yankees. But no, I don't sit here and follow the Boston Red Sox today.
Here, hey, I'm a big Robby fan. Love you guys. I have such a problem with you just saying that. Like, I guess I was a fan of dude, you love everybody. Like, and you live here, so you get to love it when we win things here, but then you also have teams away. I have such a problem with that. And I don't know how to say that to you nicely, but like, I have such a problem with that. And I don't know why it bothers me. I should just live my life and let you do you, but it bothers me that you go and pick teams like that. I don't know.
Well, I just
how to
told you
get
I'm not a
past
Red Sox
this.
fan. I said I
don't
enjoyed
know how to-
watching them win in 2004.
Yeah, but the Packers too. Like, I don't know, dude. Hey, it's a me thing, not a you thing. But I really do struggle with that.
It's okay. It's all right. We're gonna get
It's
through it
me,
together.
not you.
Yeah.
I think you and PK should both attack Robby at some point, since PK is the biggest fan gatekeeper of them all.
I mean, we may get into that tomorrow. Who knows?
I have to get in that tomorrow.
Apparently, that happened while I was gone. So, need to get after it a
it
little
did.
bit. Yeah.
We were screaming. I said, "Well, why don't you scream at Robby then?" But you weren't there.
What'd he say? Was
Well,
he
he's
prepared
just
to do
like, basically, like if it's not geography or passed down from your parents, you can't just become a fan of a team.
it? Okay.
So, and then of course, while explaining how he randomly picked an EPL team.
Yeah,
of
that's
course.
okay. Yeah. There is that. Joe, I'm looking at this free agency crop that we just brought up there. One position that has not been talked about a lot, that I look at the Titans roster and I think that you need an answer there. I'm interested to see how this ends up breaking down. Look, I've watched Javon Holland play in Miami. I think he's got a lot of potential. He's only 25 years old, and it looks like it may be coming to an end for him with the Dolphins. Now, he's thrown out these, he talked about how like the Dolphins social media has made it seem like they're moving on from him, and apparently he's got these big demands in terms of his next contract. We'll see like what the numbers end up looking like for him. But like that position specifically, I'm looking at the draft and I'm thinking there's so many different areas you need, be that edge rusher, wide receiver, quarterback, whatever. Like they still need to address safety. And I think free agency may be the spot where you do that this offseason, whether it's Holland or elsewhere. I mean, there's going to be some options available to him in free agency at safety. It's a position that, frankly, we don't talk about a lot, but a position that I feel like the Titans are going to have to find a way to address this offseason. I think free agency may be the place to do it.
Yeah, I'm with you. I mean, you're gonna have to get some guys at some spots, and then and then you're gonna have to just, although it's still best player over need, you're still gonna have to have some needs taken care of, and then needs that are a little more emphasized in the draft. I'm with you. I don't mind that one. I have a little bit of a shopping list, that kind of spans some of these tiers, and one of my guys is Jeremy Chin, 27 years old, who's with the Commanders, who had a really good year. I think they really need to think about someone like that. He's ranked 35th on our list. I can go through a few if you want. But,
Sure.
Okay. So first of all, I love this guy as a player. I think you have to stay away from him. But I just want to mention, like, Dre Greenlaw.
Yeah.
When he's right, is such a fun player to watch. It just, I mean, you're talking about a guy who's had an Achilles and has had, you get this to a certain point, and I mean, 28, not old, but he's still intriguing to me. They need to address linebacker. They need to address linebacker and safety. Tight end. What about Juwan Johnson? I really like Juwan Johnson.
Yeah.
I think he's a big play tight end. He's kind of a hybrid guy, I mean, he came in the league as a receiver, a UDFA, but no, you're talking about a guy who, 50 for 548 last year on 66 targets. They have to address that position. Nick Bolton, 25. Nick Bolton is 25 years old.
Yeah.
Now he may be top of the class in terms of inside linebackers. Do you want to invest that much in inside linebacker? I don't know. And he's one of those, it's not quite Sam Mills, but like 5'11", but man, he runs around and makes plays, David Long, same idea, right? Like, doesn't have that length you like, but man, he is a really good player. So we have him 32. I think that, if you really want to address linebacker, there you go. Now, to give a nod to Stilley, because I've heard Stilley advocate for this, and I don't think this is a terrible place to look. Alaric Jackson, Iowa guy, another former UDFA, is only 27, 6'7", 345. Played in 14 games, allowed 22 pressures, 3 sacks, 4.7% pressure rate. Was top 15. Mostly played left tackle. Now, again, is that a guy who you would bring in and say, how about right tackle? Is that a guy you bring in and say, okay, we're trying you at the left side, and J.C. Latham, you head back over to the side you played in college? I don't know, but at 39, I think that he's definitely somebody that you have to consider. That could be a quality signing. So what about De'Ami Brown? Way down the list, but he's only 25.
Yeah.
You got to help your receiver room. This guy is incredibly fast. Look, the production it was not great. So, it is, he's 93 on this list. It is traits over production. When he makes plays at times, and you're like, wow, could you unlock something there? Azeez Ojulari, right after him at 94, 25, has been disappointing. Was definitely a guy we talked about a lot during that draft as an edge for the Titans coming out of Georgia. But again, you have to add depth and some level of production. It's not great production, no question, but he's 0.48 sacks per game during his career. Again, it's not terrible. He's also been hurt and things like that, toe injury thing, there's always going to be issues with a lot of these guys who are out here, of course, but I like the younger guys who haven't had devastating injuries, and guys that have shown something, but maybe you can get more out of them.
One of the things in free agency that can accelerate you if you find this type of player. Can you find a guy that either because of injury, because of lack of opportunity, or a combination of the two, is going to come in relatively cheap, relative to his position, that blossoms? Like I think about Delanie Walker, right? Like Delanie Walker was stuck behind Vernon Davis in San Francisco. He didn't have the opportunity, and he came here and exploded. Now, unfortunately for Delanie Walker, there were years here where it looked like he was the only functional football player that they had on the Titans. But that type of guy, like, can you find that type of guy, and preferably at a premium position? Like, I'm looking at this year's crop of edge rushers. Like, you've got Khalil Mack that's could be out there at age 34. It kind of feels like he's on his last leg. We'll see what ends up happening with Josh Sweat in Philadelphia. He's number 7 on this list from The Athletic in terms of free agents. that are available. But he's, if he makes it out there and he breaks loose, he's probably going to get, over $20 million per year. Is he really that type of player? It kind of feels like an annual discussion at this point, Joe, for this guy. But like Chase Young is only 26 years old. He was number 2 pick in 2020. He's had a lot of injuries throughout his career, but like he played in every game this year for the Saints. I'm reading the write up on him right now. He was 9th in the NFL in pressures, 16th in quarterback hits, but he only had 5.5 sacks. It's like those two things don't add up there. It's like what's the deal there? I was interested. I always am fascinated to look at like some of these projected contracts that are out there, and I looked it up for Chase Young on Spotrac that they've got. They got him at 4 years, $70 million. Annual average value is 17.5 per year. And the talent's tempting. I can't talk myself into that if I'm the Titans.
I can't either. There's also like weird stuff with him, and teams constantly are like, "No, thanks." Yeah. To me, that he's someone who actually has real red flags. Red flags are way over estimated, But to me, I think Chase Young has earned some red flags.
615-737-1025, our phone number. More of your thoughts to get to on NFL free agency. We'll do that next. The Rex Rant coming up at 7:45. All that ahead. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Preds fans, don't miss Smashville Live tomorrow night at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue at 6 o'clock. See your Preds star players up close and personal. Your chance for autographs and pictures. That's tomorrow night at Brewhouse 100 in Bellevue. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. We are live from our Busy Bee Plumbing, Heating, and Air Conditioning Game Nashville studios. Home of the $99 yearly Beehive membership, where the buzz is always about great service. Taking your thoughts on the Titans, on NFL free agency, 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. Joe, one texter asking, so what is the day that we will start hearing that the signings are reported? Is it after the negotiations? Is it March the 10th? I can never remember. Always the legal tampering period in the NFL. One of my favorite times of the year. And then we act like the first day of NFL free agency, these contracts just magically come together in a matter of moments.
Yeah, I mean, we'll know a lot of the landing spots before they can officially be landing spots. So then what's usually couple days in advance, probably?
Yeah, like the free agency, I believe it's March the 12th. So a couple days beforehand, you'll start to see some of those things roll in. So
yeah, reported. And, with agents writing tweets for Rappaport,
yeah.
His film speaks loudly.
Yeah.
His film speaks loudly, and he carries a big stick, says Ian Rappaport.
Yeah, maybe so. Josh from Columbia, upset with Adam in Portland, says, I swear I was just hitting play on the app. I had a feeling Adam in Portland was going to be on the line. I guess I'm in the hater club when it comes to Adam in Portland, because this dude loves the sound of his own voice. Get off Robbie's back, you pancake. I've heard him come on to this program and talk bleep about Stillman and then call into Stillman and company and kiss Jared's butt. This from Josh from Columbia on the text line. Adam from Portland at times will catch some strays on this text line. There's no doubt about that.
Wow. So is that true? Does Adam go on Stilly's show and say, Jared, you were right all along?
I don't know.
That's quite a charge there. That's quite an accusation. Someone else on the text line, this is a good idea, and I will do this before the show's over. Go back and look at these rankings and look at the Titans signings from last year. I mean, I think Awuzie, my guess is Awuzie probably was, Awuzie and Ridley probably were, I would guess, top 25, top 30. Now, remember, Snead was a trade, but I would think that those guys would have been both pretty high on the list last year.
I would think so. Now, look, free agency last year for a lot of teams worked out pretty well, right? Like you had all the running backs with Derrick Henry and Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs and all those guys. Like they all went to other teams and played really well. Like, Xavier McKinney was signed to Green Bay, top safety on the market. He played really well last year. I think last year's free agent crop as a whole was better than this one sets up to be. Now, again,
especially in retrospect.
At
the time, people weren't excited about the backs as they should have been, but in retrospect, there's no question.
It worked out really, really well. Now, look, maybe like if you're the Titans and you walk out of this with like help at safety that you feel good about, and you can add some depth at wide receiver, and maybe you take a flyer on a guy at edge rusher. Because again, like how many elite edge rushers are making it to free agency? It happens on occasion, but it's a rare thing. So can you find a guy to kind of stockpile that room there and see if he can have some production for you? Like you're going to have to, I think, take some chances on guys in free agency if you want to totally round out this roster the way that you want to heading into next year. Like you can't do it all in the draft, particularly at the moment not having a third round pick.
Now, look, as we've illustrated, it's not exactly a glorious class. Just overall, you go free agency and draft, and it's like neither.
It's not great.
It's kind of like wah with the whole thing. But that doesn't mean you don't need to get in there and help your team, because your team is way more wah than anybody else, basically. So sorry for all the wah, but you know what I'm saying.
Yes.
You've got to go. You just have to, there are players in that free agency list who are going to next year be like, wow, what a great signing. What a great find. And also there are going to be players, and probably more of those players near the top. Like Josh Sweat, to me, he's a good player, and he had some huge plays in this run. But if you look at his entire, history, it's like someone's going to pay way too much for that guy.
I agree. I totally agree.
It's guaranteed, and that happens too. So you don't want to be one of those teams that overpays. I mean, I think back to, there's a lot of John Robinson's greatest hits that we talk about. Bud Dupree, another one of those, ACL. And even at the time, we definitely talked on the show like, okay, Bud Dupree, very good player, but you got the ACL. Also, when you're on the other side of TJ Watt, what does that mean for you and your matchups and your opportunities? And how does that? And it turned out to be exactly it. They completely overpaid for the guy.
Yeah, like I'm pulling up the Athletic free agency rankings from last year, and they got they did this. This was from Randy Mueller, who did the top 150 too, and he kind of went through position by position after that. But just like kind of looking through the top 150 here, it's interesting the way that it's ranked and the way that it ended up shaking out here. And you had Brian Burns as the top guy, Daniil Hunter, Saquon was at 5, Kirk Cousins was at 7. He ends up in Atlanta. Zadarius Smith, Josh Jacobs was at 12. L'Jarius Sneed, by the way, was on this, I guess because of the way the contract negotiations were going, and he was 13th. Xavier McKinney was 14th. Lloyd Cushenberry at 15. So Titans got a top 15 one last year.
I forgot him. Yeah. So Cushenberry, where were Awuzie and Ridley?
Let's see here. Awuzie, I still have not come across yet. So see if I can find him on this list. But I'm going down the list, and he's like, I'm at like 40, and I don't see him.
Wow.
So maybe I
That's
overlooked
surprising to me.
I mean, Derrick Henry's at 51 on this list, if that kind of shows you where
worked out all right.
So sometimes, sometimes there's a little bit of a miscalculation on the free agent list. I would say in retrospect, Derrick Henry probably worked out a little bit better than 51 on this list.
What is, you see Ridley anywhere?
Nope. Still scrolling down.
Holy cow. So Randy Mueller is either a woozy Ridley hater or boy, the Titans actually got some terrific bargains, at least in terms of, the rankings and relative to other players. They still, paid decent money for those guys. That does,
Aaron Brewer's at 95 though. So there's that.
Well, this year there's some Titans legends out there on this top 150 list. You got Fulton. I think he's like tier 8, but he's on that list. Someone else I just saw who now eludes me, but I'm like, yeah. Well, of course, Ernest Jones.
Yes, Ernest Jones available again out there.
Yeah. Bring him back.
Go get him back. Hey, at number 150 on this list is Marcus Mariota. So there you go. 615-737-1025, our phone number. 615-737-1025. The Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode is coming up next. We will get back into your free agency thoughts, your thoughts on Andrew Brunette and the Nashville Predators in the 8 o'clock hour as well. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3, The Game.
Sometimes he wakes up on the wrong side of the bed. And sometimes he's just, well, Joe.
Awkward moment. Let's do it.
This is the Rex Rant, now on Robby and Rexrode.
Well, to that point, it's Combine Week. It's Rexrode's favorite week of the sporting calendar year when the NFL Combine gets underway.
Yeah, baby. Did you know that Sam Darnold didn't throw at the Combine?
Really?
I'd just like to throw that out there for anybody who, wants to make sweeping judgments around this time of year. Sam Darnold, fully healthy, decided not to throw at the Combine.
So you got a real weakness you don't want to show.
It is that time of the day, time for the Rex Rant with Joe Rexrode. You can check it out every morning here on the program. Joseph, the floor is yours. I turn things over to you.
Okay, so to follow up from our last conversation, so you found Ridley was at 23.
Ridley was at 23. I still don't see a Woozy. I'm looking for him.
Randy Mueller hates Shobi Awuzie. We learned this on the show today. We don't have Randy anymore, but apparently he did not like Shidomi because I think that's an oversight, right? Like that's an oversight. A Woozy, he had been hurt and stuff like that. But
I don't know. I don't remember the way it played out. Maybe he didn't think that a Woozy was going to break free to free. I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it could be. That could be. Yeah, but I would say, yeah, eligible for that list or believed to be eligible. Then I would think he would have been top 40. So by the rankings, I'd say the Titans, that's 15, 23, and to me, clearly top 40 with a Woozy. Then you get Snead, who's 13, right?
Yep.
That's why everybody's like, woo, let Rand cook. And then
did not work.
And then you just don't know how it's going to work out. So I'm going to get into this. We can get into it tomorrow too, but I've been triggered a little bit here with this fan thing. And basically, I guess I'm defending you. Although I would love Kaharski to scream at you for once instead of me.
Sure.
So I'm here for that. I'd like you two to argue, but it is really dumb, the whole idea. So I'm gonna trace my fandom real quick, okay? First of all, I do agree. Like geography and fandom passed down through generations, that's the most organic, it's the most real fandom. And absolutely. I think that's ideal. So a lot of Titans fans who talk to us, Preds fans, and especially younger ones who actually grew up as kids, that's right now they're in misery with their teams. They're like, this is my fan. This is what I was born into. Like, I have to suffer with this. So I get the idea of like someone texted at you basically saying it's kind of not fair, you get to also enjoy a team that wins. But look, man, I think fandom is just, if you truly are passionate about it, then I think you're allowed to do it. I was born into Tigers, Lions, Pistons, Red Wings, and then into a family that was very split and continues to be very split, Michigan or Michigan State. Just that's an in-state thing, and it's if you're in those in-state rivalries, it's just in families, different people, it's just constant screaming. So I got older. I fell in love with the Washington Redskins of the early 80s, the Smurfs, the Hogs, John Riggins, Dexter Manley. That was my number 2 team. I was passionate. I was a kid, We moved to Northern Virginia, so then it became even more. But only when they played the Lions, I rooted against them. But other than that, I loved them. Then those players moved on. I stopped being a fan. Dan Fouts, San Diego Chargers, Kellen Winslow, Charlie Joyner, Wes Chandler, John Jefferson, insane talent, insane scheme, Air Coryell, way ahead of its time, throwing the ball over the yard. That was my AFC team. Passionate. The late Sunday game, I mean, if Chargers Raiders was on NBC with Merlin Olsen and oh my gosh, oh no, please help me, Dick Enberg and Merlin Olsen calling I'm absolutely locked in, okay? And then Fouts retires, they move on, and then I stop being a fan. Is that allowed?
Sure.
I mean, it just changes. I've told the story many times. When the Barry Sanders thing happened, the greatest running back of all time, one of the greatest players of all time, probably the most thrills I've ever had watching an athlete is Barry Sanders. You do not miss him playing a game. I was lucky enough to watch him live. And when he bailed on the Lions, I'm like, I'm done. The Lions have actually screwed this guy up. I'm done with the Lions. Okay. And so some people say you can't do that. Well, I did it. And you know what? I say the rules for me are now, If the Lions win it all, I can't celebrate. I can be happy for friends and family, but I disavow them. Okay. We moved away from Michigan. Like I said, Northern Virginia, 5th grade, and then overseas. I just rooted for Michigan and Michigan State. They were both in-state teams. Whoever was better when they played, I rooted for the team that was better. Is that bad fandom? A lot of people in my family would say it is. Like, dude, you can't root for both of them. I mean, Auburn or Alabama fans would say, how could you possibly like both of us? You hate one side and you love the other. I'm sorry. That's what I did. Whoever was better, I wanted that team to win. I mean, I'm sorry. Screw you. I can do whatever I want to do as a fan. So, like, as I moved, then my kid gets into the Golden State Warriors, and I'm telling you, like, that basketball team, the joy they've brought our family, you can say it's front running, but we got into them before they won any titles, and it's just the love of watching Steph Curry and Klay Thompson, and then having a link personally to Draymond Green, and it's like, I mean, we became like huge fans, like, and I still am. Will that still be the case when those guys move on? Probably not. Are you allowed to be a fan of a team based on players at the time and then move on? I'll tell you this. I don't have a passionate fan feel for the Red Wings or the Pistons anymore. I love my teams as a kid. I love Steve Yzerman and Shanahan and Fedorov and Isaiah Thomas and Dumars and the Bad Boys. And now it's like, wish them well, but I don't have that same fan passion. But I do have it for the Detroit Tigers. Why is that? I don't know.
Tigers been doing a lot of winning. That's why.
What's that?
Tigers been doing a lot of winning. That's why.
Well, they did win last year. That was incredible out of nowhere. And then they didn't get Alex Bregman. So darn it. But the bottom line is, like, if you truly care, however it comes about, truly care or don't care, move on, switch teams, all that. Sorry, you're allowed to do it. You're allowed to do it. And again, PK, the ultimate just hypocrite, talking about how you have to, it has to be geographic. It has to be passed down. And again, he's got his EPL team. He walks around with a little soccer team and goes and watches it. That's completely manufactured fandom. If you do
smoke weed
you cannot judge
constantly.
Keys are very appreciative of your shade thrown at PK over here. He's cheering. Hands are flying in the air. He loves it.
Good.
It is
so
good.
PK, if you'd like to react to that tomorrow, that's fine. But again, if you're going to react to that, PK, you need to scream at Robby, not me.
Scream at me. I would love to have. Look, it's very simple. I grew up a Titans fan. I love the Titans. And then they pushed me and several others out the door with the way they operated from about 2009 till about 2017. So, like, I still like the Titans, still wish the Titans well, but some other things happened in my life and developed a love for the Green Bay Packers. That's what happened. I'm not going to apologize for it. That's what happened. So here we are. Yeah, I'm with you though. Like, it's interesting how, like, things fade. Like, we have not had a basketball team here. Like, people will say the Grizzlies. It's like Memphis is 3 hours away from here, and like, I don't really associate myself with the Memphis Grizzlies. So, I grew up a Heat fan because I like Dwayne Wade, and it really kind of started from Shaq moving on from the Lakers. I followed him to Miami because we didn't have a team, and then I saw Dwayne Wade. I was like, I love this guy. So then I was a Heat fan forever, and then I got accused of being a front runner when LeBron showed up. I was like, no, I've been here for a few years. It's all good. It's all good. So I think it ebbs and flows in your life.
Yes.
Meanwhile, I've been through
jumper.
Like, Shiano Sunday and Kiffin and mattress burning and all that stuff with Tennessee, and there's nothing that can break me from it. It's a bad habit.
Right. And that's the thing. Like, there's some, I don't think I'll ever, like, I will live and die with the Detroit Tigers. That's the team that I will always, no matter what. But yeah, I mean, I guess if people want to call me a bat, some people are mad at me on the text, and that's fine. You're allowed to be mad at me too. And I'm allowed to laugh at you.
I mean, the only thing I had a problem with what you said was the rooting for both Michigan and Michigan State. That's a fundamental flaw.
I mean, I get it. Like, believe me, I've taken so much crap for that. I'm like, I'm sorry. Like, when you move away from the state, then it's kind of like they're both your teams, right?
I have seen people that root for, like, Vanderbilt and Tennessee. I've not seen very much of the, Tennessee, Alabama, or Tennessee, Florida, but like I've seen a lot of the Vanderbilt, Tennessee co-fan, which I've always found to be kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, and if I lived there, and I moved away in 4th grade. If I was living there, I would have had to make a choice. You have to, right? Once you move away, you're separated from all the screaming daily. So, it's kind of like, I guess it's kind of like the best of both worlds.
Yeah. I mean, C from Franklin says, so Robby bounces off the Titans when things get bad. When he gets tough, he leaves. That's an offense. It's like, it wasn't just the football team. There's a lot of things going on around there that made it very difficult to root for. So there you go.
Yes.
And look, when the Titans win the Super Bowl, I'm not allowed to be out there like lifting the Lombardi trophy in the parade. I get that.
But you can throw confetti on Stilly when he's on his float.
Well, I could do that. 615-737-1025, our phone number, 615-737-1025. Couple more thoughts on the NFL Combine front I want to get to. We will get back into the Predators, Andrew Brunette discussion as well. All that coming up. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063, The Game. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by First Horizon, Big Bank Muscle, Small Bank Hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Robbie Stanley, Joe Rexrode, Nick Keyser here with you on this Tuesday morning. Taking your thoughts on our phone and text lines driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Joe, a couple of thoughts on the NFL front to get to before we get back into the Andrew Burnett Predators discussion. Number one, add Chris Canty to the list of people who believe Travis Hunter is a wide receiver in the NFL. I heard him talking on Unsportsmanlike this morning. He says Travis Hunter, he would have him as a wide receiver, and he would have some sub packages on defense for him to be a corner on occasion, but would draft him as a touchdown scorer, a wide receiver. So the debate rages on, Joe Rexrode, as to which position is best for Travis Hunter in the National Football League.
Well, all due respect to Chris Canty, Stilly, whoever, I want to, when I add it up before the draft, and people may change their minds before that. I'm gonna keep most of the draft like film analysts. Now I count TD in that. All due respect to hashtag Jared's film room, by the way, but I don't know that Canty makes the cut. But maybe that's just because he disagrees with me.
Well, could be. Some more NFL news. Joe, it came out yesterday. I think Diana Rossini reported this, that the Green Bay Packers were the lone team try to get rid of the tush push in the NFL. They're fighting the good fight to get rid of this play and the ridiculousness of the tush push when you got Washington Commanders jumping 5 times in a row, offsides, flying over the top of the offensive line. What did you make of apparently the Green Bay Packers and their resistance to the tush push around the NFL?
I don't know. Are they the lone team, or they're just the team that submitted?
They're the team that
I'm
submitted.
Sure they're not
the
alone.
Claim. Yes.
Yeah. Your Green Bay Packers are the courageous ones fighting the good fight. Yeah, I think I'm on that. Yeah, it's again, I'll go back to 20 years ago, the absolute screaming, especially from Notre Dame fans. I know it's college football versus pro football, but I remember being like, yeah, that does seem unfair, right? He can go in there and push the guy from behind and get the winning touchdown. That was Reggie Bush pushing Matt Leinart.
Yes.
At Notre Dame. We got to the point where it's just, I think it's a more dangerous play than I don't know that we've had a lot of injuries, but man, talk about old school, like 1893 football that Teddy Roosevelt tried to outlaw. And I agree with someone who I think tweeted this yesterday, like, what skills involved in this? I understand, like, football's a power sport too, so what skills involved in a fullback dive? But it just doesn't seem fair. And I know that, like, Eagles fans in particular would just scream at this, but, like, it's a guaranteed first down for them every time they have a yard to go. There's nothing you can do about it, really, other than, like,
jump over the top of a pile.
Yeah, I guess if you get leverage, but that obviously never happens. And then you had the rant about the situation at the goal line, the playoff game, and that to me did bring up, like, can we just get rid of this? Like, where I just think if pulling is not allowed, why is pushing allowed? Philosophically, if you're not allowed to pull someone past the first down, because I think honestly, you talk about a dangerous play. I think one of the dangerous plays in football is when you have a ball carrier right at that first down line and a tackler, and they're struggling, and then, like, the tight end comes in and just blasts them in
from
the
behind.
back.
Yeah.
And I think that's dangerous. So I think that I'm on Team Packers here.
I'm interested to see where it goes. Like you said, Philadelphia fans are going to freak out if it happens. It's not really like any other play in football, right? Like, it's basically a rugby scrum is what it is. Like, that's basically what it is. And it's like, okay, like, look, I don't fault the Eagles for doing it. Like, until it's against the rules, I would do it, right? Like, and look, now other teams have started to do it. Like, Some teams do it and don't use their quarterback, which is also interesting. Like the Lions do it with Laporta, and the Packers do it with Tucker Kraft. So like they've got tight ends doing it now, which is interesting. But like, it's just not like any other play in the league. And like you said, it doesn't seem to be the greatest for player safety. Like you just got guys being pushed from behind. You got basically like a dog pile that just everybody goes straight to the ground, and you're trying to get leverage on the tush push. It's just a weird thing. I mean, you had Chris Jones in the Super Bowl, like basically lining up sideways to try to defend it. It was just really weird.
Yeah, Dylan says, don't let them get into position to do it. If you can't stop the opposing team, that's on you. Stop babying the game. Okay, well, that's fine, but I say it's cheating. So if someone's cheating and I don't like them cheating, I want the cheating to stop. Am I babying the game? Yeah, I think it's, again, why do we?
Well, and by the way, stopping teams from getting in short yardage situations throughout a game is not realistic. Like you're not stopping teams from having a few situations in a game where it's 3rd and 1 or 4th and 1.
Right. Teams get 20 first downs a game, Dylan. So, I mean, both teams are going to like gain yardage and get first downs. And both teams are going to have short yardage situations. If you're not allowed to pull guys, why are you allowed to push them?
Yeah, that's the part. I mean, I heard like LeVar Arrington talking about this, and he was like, in my day, you didn't do this. Like this was not even thought of, and you weren't allowed.
Right.
So like, why have we all of a sudden become allowed to just start pushing people who are carrying the ball?
Right. Like again, 20 years ago, college football, but what happened on that play was highly controversial. Like, of course you can't do that. What are we talking about? You can't do that. Of course you can't. And it is contrary to player safety. Allowing someone to come into a situation and with full momentum and blast into, sometimes they blast into their own players' back, but blast into people is absolutely not a player safety friendly thing.
Well, quite frankly, like as a football viewing fan, like I don't really want to watch a tush push 9 times a game, right? Like in every short yardage situation, I don't want to just be like, all right, here they go. They're about to all dog pile in the middle, and they'll probably pick up the first down. Like it's not a very exciting play either.
Right. Like it's been, it's kind of a fascination when it started, and then other teams started doing it. I do like that you have seen some counters off it, right? Where all of a sudden you'll have a little play action or you'll do something different. Yeah, that's cool. But yeah, I think the fundamental just question of whether it should be allowed or not. I guess I'm a Packers fan with you.
Yeah.
Count me as a Packers fan.
Pick them all up. 615-737-1025. Our phone number. We'll get back into the Predators and Andrew Brunette discussion coming up next. It is also time for Preds Pick to Click here on the program. Be the first caller. 615-737-1025. If you guess a goal scorer for tonight's game, you win a pair of tickets to a future Nashville Predators home game. We'll do that next. Robby and Rexrode, 1025, 1063 The Game. Preds pick to click on Robby and Rexrode. Preds in action tonight taking on the Florida Panthers. The standings in the pick to click competition. Rexrode remaining in first place with 11 correct answers. Listeners in sole possession of second place with 8. I have 7. Keyser has 4. That's where the competition stands as we enter into the stretch run of the regular season here. With that in mind, let's head back to our 102.5 The Game phone line driven by WilsonCountyHyundai.com. Welcome in Casey to the program. Casey, good morning. Thanks for calling in. Who is your pick to click tonight for the Nashville Predators?
Good morning, fellas. Let's go with the captain.
Going with Roman Josi. Casey, thanks for the call. So
You got it. Thank
Josi,
you.
the selection. Keyser, you're up first in the competition. Josi's off the board.
All right. I'll go with one Steven Stamkos, who's on his longest current goal drought. So I'm going to see him break the streak later on this evening.
Rexrode, Josi, Stamkos, off the board.
He will be moved soon. He's got to get on the board. Show people what they want. Gus Nyquist.
So going with Nyquist. I will take Philip Forsberg. So I'll go Forsberg in the 4-hole, which doesn't happen very often, but that's what I'm going with tonight. Josi, Stamkos, Nyquist, and Forsberg, the selections in Preds pick to click. Joey had a lot of thoughts on this earlier, so let's get back into the Andrew Brunette discussion. So we know this Predator season is not going anywhere. They're not going to approach the playoffs. Right now, they're 30th in the league. And as things stand today, are in pretty good spot to end up with a high pick in the draft. Now, it's a lottery system in the NHL. So, just because they may finish 30th, they may not end up with the 3rd overall pick. We'll see how that ends up working out from a lottery standpoint. Regardless, you got to get to the trade deadline here, which is coming up next week. And then it's going to be, how do you fix this moving forward? What's the path for this team returning to being a competitive hockey team next year when we all thought that's what they were going to be this year? And it's just been a disaster, basically from the opening puck drop of this year until now. I mean, some of the same things that we were talking about with the 0-5 start, Joe, we're talking about right now. They're not a very good defensive team. The goaltending at times has been a struggle this year for them. Offensively, outside of a stretch in, early January, probably until about the end of that month, where they were pretty good offensively, by and large, on the whole, they've been a bad offensive team this year. When you combine all those things together, that's how you end up as the 30th team in the league. So, having said that, what's the path forward? And is Andrew Brunette a part of it? I think that's the first big decision that the Predators are going to have to make this offseason. Is Andrew Brunette your coach next season? Now, we had this discussion in November. I felt like at the time that Brunette, having proved himself with 1 year with the Panthers, albeit with a very talented roster, but doing a good job of navigating them through a very tough situation when Joel Quenneville being let go. They won the President's Trophy that year, and they got swept in the second round by Tampa Bay. Now, Florida made the decision to move on from him after that and hire Paul Maurice. Obviously, that has worked out very well for the Florida Panthers. Paul Maurice is a Hall of Fame coach. Predators last year got off to a rough start, and I thought Brunette did an outstanding job navigating them through the second half of the season, the run that they went on, and you felt good about him heading into this year. I didn't think it made a whole lot of sense to fire him in November. I thought that would have been very reactionary. However, we're now almost a full season into this where it's been a disaster from start to finish. So how do you view Brunette and where things stand for him right now as the Predators are getting close to the last 25 games or so of the season?
I think we probably knew this was coming unless there was some incredible turnaround, which we did entertain, I guess, briefly a couple times this season. But once you got through there was obviously there was a real feeling about, this may be one of those in-season firings, and this may be it for him. A couple months into the season, that passed. So you figured, at the time we talked about it, okay, so then there may be a decision, at the end of next year. Or we've talked about the real possibility of Brunette getting that 3rd year, but being one of those guys early next season where it's like, the hot seat list come out and he's 1, 2, or 3, right? I don't have the entire league in my mind right now in terms of who would be on that list next year, but he'd have a real shot at number one.
Yeah.
Right. But now you get into this slog, this absolute death march to the finish of this season, and it's something that absolutely has to be entertained. It's fair. Someone said on the text line earlier, because I guess I tend to, play devil's advocate on behalf of Brunette. Someone said on the text line earlier, well, why did Florida move away from him? But again, it was like that was a team built to win right then. This is a first-time head coach who, of course, was thrust into that role because of all this stuff with Joe Quenneville and Kyle Beach, all the stuff from before. And they wanted a coach who had demonstrated a high level of winning. They got one, and obviously it's worked out pretty well for them. But that I don't think that's as much a reflection on Brunette as some people want to make it. And I think you and I both agree. We've talked about it. Like I think Brunette's really smart guy, good with people, good coach. But this league fires coaches and recycles coaches like no other. And I gotta think I'll go 50-50 right now. And the only reason I'm 50 on no is just because of Barry Trotz, because Barry Trotz does come at things with a coach's perspective, does understand the challenges a coach goes through. I'm sure is looking in the mirror and raising his hand and saying, a lot of these issues are what I've done. I mean, let's be fair. I mean, this is not like, I mean, there's some serious questions about what has happened with the building of this roster. Yes, like Doherty said earlier, Alex Doherty said earlier, like he's been able to retain a lot of things, which is important. But this UC Saros deal, for example, could be tons of pain ahead, and other deals as well.
So where do you come down on the Predators and Andrew Brunette? Give us a call, 615-737-1025. We'll take your thoughts on our text line as well. What does the future look like for Brunette? What does the future look like for the Nashville Predators as they try to navigate through the rest of what has been a disastrous season to this point and try to fix it heading into next year? We'll have more on that next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Welcome back in, Robby and Rexrode. Got some tickets to give away to see the Preds take on the Winnipeg Jets at Bridgestone Arena this Thursday night. Be caller number 5, 615-737-1025. Caller 5 will win a pair of tickets to see the Preds take on the Jets this Thursday at Bridgestone Arena. Robby and Rexrode brought to you by First Horizon. Big bank muscle, small bank hustle. Visit firsthorizon.com/get-it-all. Discussing the future of Andrew Brunette and the Nashville Predators. Where will this go at the end of the year? Will Brunette be the coach for the Predators next year? Will Barry Trotz make a change this offseason? And, Joe, here's kind of where I come down on it as we sit here today on February 25th. My opinion on Brunette has not really changed all that much from what it was earlier this year. Like, I think he's a smart guy. I think he's a good young coach. I think that, he's eventually got the chance to be a pretty darn good coach in this league. Having said that, I also realize that good coaches in the National Hockey League get fired all the time. Like, this is a sport where, number one, they recycle through a lot of coaches, and number two, it's got a lot of coaching movement. I mean, we've seen that already this year. The thing that really bothers me about how this is played out and what I do not think helps Brunette in this discussion is a couple things. Number one, I think at some point throughout the course of a year, when it's spiraling the way that it has with the Predators, I think you have to show that you can fix it. Like, you're the guy that can be the guy that fixes it next year. And I just don't feel that much different about watching them right now than I have really at any other point this season, which is, yeah, they got flashes here or there where they look good and they do the right things. But by and large, we're watching the same team that we've been watching all year. It's been 56 games of it just looks dysfunctional at times out there. Their offense can't score. Their defense, and albeit they've shuffled some things around on defense and they've had some injuries on defense, their defense right now is bad. Like, they're a bad defensive team. And it just kind of feels like there hasn't really been answers that they've been able to find to that this year. So I think, number one, throughout the course of a year, you got to be able to come up with some adjustments and some changes to fix what we're seeing. And look, he has adjusted. They moved Stamkos to center. I thought that helped offensively for a while. They've tried to tweak some things with the way that they run their system. He's talked about trying to simplify some things with his forwards. They've tried to do some things. The problem is, Joe, very little of it's worked. So what does that mean heading into next offseason? And the other part of it is this. Like, you look at everybody, particularly all the veteran players, all of them are having down years. Every one of them. O'Reilly's having a down year. Forsberg's having a down year. Yossi, Stamkos, Marchessault, Shea. Go up down the list of their guys. Nyquist. They're having bad years, down years. Is Forsberg having a bad year? No, but he's not having the year that I think that we expected from him heading into this season. So, and then you look at the young guys. They've got some promising young players. Like, I like a lot of what Svechkov has done. I think Svechkov lately has kind of fallen off a little bit, but you expect that a little bit with some young players. LaRue, I think, has had some nice moments this year. But, like, Evangelista, I felt like this was a really important year for Evangelista, and he's been bad. Like, he's been bad all year long this year. Novak, we talked about him heading into the year. Like, he was going to be a really key piece of this. And he hadn't been able to handle it. Now, is that on the coach or is that on kind of the role that they thrust him in earlier this year? We can have that discussion. Point is, there's not really one thing right now, Joe, that you could look at with this team and say, yeah, I feel great about the direction that's heading right now. And that to me is where you get into some trouble as a coach.
Yeah. And look, we all can agree. Like I said last segment, there's a lot of all of this stuff. It's coach and GM, but the GM is going to make the decision on the coach. And I think a couple key points from our earlier conversation with Alex Doherty, which people can check that out on the app. It was a good conversation. A couple things that I really took away from it. One, a reiteration of ownership's satisfaction with Trotz. I think that's an important, in case anybody wants to get into it. It's just not it's not an either or conversation. It's not even close to that. Right. So there's that. and again, I think Trotz is absolutely culpable for some things here, but he's making the decision on the coach. And Doherty also brought up the tactics as being a big thing here. And there have been glimpses of guys in the locker room, I think, with some frustration, maybe the Stamkos thing from earlier in the year, right? Different way of playing, and some guys struggle to adjust and all those things. And a good point by him, this isn't just straight up Joel Quenneville's system replicated. It is a blending of things. And look, it's just not working. And frankly, like last year, so much of it was about that too. And then they caught fire. And then you're like, okay, well, they've got it and they're going to carry it into next year. And then Trotz adds those guys. You're like, well, shoot, now you got big time studs, veterans. And what is that going to mean? Wow, what a season. And we all know what's happened. This texture, I think, is interesting. He says, unnamed texture, I think it's honestly just the marriage between roster and coach. Unless Trotz is going to bring a specific type of player Bruno needs, you have to move off of him. With the moves that he's made that you can't erase, you have to go get a coach that can coach the roster built now. There isn't one player that's going to change what this is now. Offense, defense, and goalie play is all bad. I think there's some truth to that. I think it's you have to think about the roster, which you're largely locked into, and what's the ideal coach. And if Brunette can't, like you said, demonstrate that he can fix this, can change things significantly with this roster, then it's hard to make the argument for him after this season.
Yeah, and again, like Barry Trotz, I don't think is blameless in this discussion, right? Like there have been some decisions that he's made that are questionable as they move forward here. The Saros contract being one of them. We'll see what that ends up looking like, how that plays out. A lot of Predators fans are mad with the way that they've handled like your Tomasinos and your Parsonens and those guys of the world. I don't know that any one of those guys is going to break loose anywhere else and be like some can't miss superstar player, but I understand you want more production from young guys as they move forward here. On the Trotz front, I said it earlier, I'll repeat it now. Like, I'm not going to sit here today on February the 25th and act like I didn't think Stamkos, Marchessault, and Brady Shea were all great moves at the time, because I did. Did we just all totally miss on that? Are they all getting old and falling off the cliff at the same time? Or is that a reflection of what we're talking about right now? And it's just not a good fit with the system. And if you go out and you hire a different coach, like does Steven Stamkos look more like Steven Stamkos next year? Does Marchessault and like the biggest one to me right now is Brady Shea. They gave Brady Shea a 7-year deal and paid him a ton of money. And right now he looks he looks awful out there. He's been bad for the majority of this season. Stamkos is on a 9-game point drought right now. That's concerning. We've seen moments this year of Stamkos being pretty darn good and playing well. So does a new coach fix all that? Like if you bring in another coach that you feel like is more suited his style to the way these guys need to play, are they competitive next year? Or, Joe, is it as simple as it doesn't really matter who the coach is? These guys have just fallen off, and this is a bad roster composition from the standpoint of the age of your core forwards specifically.
Yeah, well, if that's the case, and they move on from Brunette, and they bring in a new coach, and that proves to be the case, well, then the conversation about Trotz heats up quickly, right? I mean,
yes,
and I'm with you. I raised my hand. I just like everybody now, like it was very exciting, but that's why we are perpetrators of radio gas baggery and not people who get paid millions to put together a hockey team, right? I mean, that's just so. I mean, if you move on, bring in somebody totally different, and the same problems are there, then I think you've got your answer. That probably also helps Brunette get his next job too.
I think their biggest problem right now, to me, is just pretty easy to identify. Like I think they need a world of help at center. And that's unfortunately probably the hardest thing to find in this league is help at the center position. Like, Ryan O'Reilly, I still think is a good player. Ryan O'Reilly at this stage of his career is not a number one center in the National Hockey League. And he's had a down year offensively as well. I still like a lot of what O'Reilly brings to the table, but Ryan O'Reilly at this stage in his career is not a number one. They tried to make Novak the number two heading into the year and didn't work. Stamkos has been, for a large portion of the season, their number one guy. They've moved him back to wing recently, and they put Svechkov up there. Like, I still think probably long-term they want Stamkos on the wing. Problem is you got to find some answers at center, and unfortunately, Joe, that has been the most difficult thing for them to find in the history of their franchise. We got this text earlier, and maybe it ends up working out this way. I don't know. Like, we're still a long way away from the draft lottery and the draft. But, like, if you walk out of this and you get one of those two centermen that I've talked about in the draft, either Misa or Hagens, like, in the long run, is this year worth it? Maybe. I don't know.
Maybe.
Like, depends on how good those guys are. Maybe. But that doesn't really help you a whole lot in the short term right now when you're trying to maximize what this roster is with Stamkos and Marchessault and their age.
Right. And if you're Brunette, I don't know what the answer would be for you in terms of keeping this job other than you got to play better. You got to win. You got to show the ability to get this team to play even when everybody knows this season's over. And you got to win, but obviously that's contrary at this point to the best interest of the franchise.
615.
So,
yeah, like that's the thing. And look, we've talked about this too, Joe. The players in that room don't care about that. Like Ryan O'Reilly, and Forsberg and Stamkos, they do not care about trying to nail down a top 3 pick this year. I understand that, but like organizationally at this point, like if you're Barry Trotz, I do care about that. Like if I'm Barry Trotz right now, that's exactly what I care about the rest of this year. So you got two things right now that kind of are at odds with each other.
Real quick, Ryan O'Reilly also is a guy who they could be last place and it could be the last game of the season, and he will block a puck with his face, and then blame his teeth for the fact that they broke.
Yes,
he'll be that guy. That. How many other guys are gonna sell out to win the rest of the year?
Well, I think that's an important thing to find out, and very interested here in the next week and a half to see who's on the move and who stays at the deadline. I'm interested to see how active the Predators end up being. We'll have more of your thoughts on the Preds, wrap up the show coming up next. Robby and Rexrode, 102.5, 106.3 The Game. Check out Nashville's best deal this week. It's from Barrio Burrito Bar in Murfreesboro. At Barrio Burrito Bar, every bite a celebration of fresh ingredients, vibrant spices, and bold flavors dancing on your taste buds like a fiesta in your mouth. Head to theGameNashville.com/deals. Get half off a $25 gift card while supplies last. Robby and Rexrode here with you on this Tuesday morning, talking Preds, taking your thoughts on that. Andrew on the text line says, if you had to guess behind closed doors, what is Brunette saying to Barry Trotz about why this has failed? I don't know. I think go ahead, Joe.
I was going to say it's a daily discussion, right? It's a daily discussion. Every game, every shift. I mean, and I'm sure there's been plenty of discussions between those two about this player or that player, what's going on, and I'm sure they're in lockstep and on the same page on things largely, but that doesn't mean that Trotz doesn't have to make a tough decision when the season's over.
Right. Like, look, sometimes you put teams together and it doesn't work, right? Like we've seen that. Sometimes for whatever reason, the composition of your roster, players don't fit together. I mean, it could be some of that, right? It's gone so poorly that it's hard for me to believe, Joe, that it's just one thing. Like
exactly,
it's and that's what I think makes it so complicated to figure out moving forward. Is like I think there are some Predators fans that believe it's just the coach. Like if you just fire Andrew Brunette and you bring in another coach, that all your problems are magically going to be solved. And I don't believe that. Like, do I think that firing Andrew Brunette this season may be something that has to be done? Yeah, I think you might have to do that, and you might have to go take a shot with somebody else to see if a new coach, a new system, new way of thinking can unlock some things. I also look at this roster right now, and I'm worried to death if I'm a Predators fan that these guys have just gotten old and they're kind of stuck in limbo right now of waiting for that next crop to come up. And in the meantime, these guys are not good enough to get the job done anymore. Like I think there's probably some of that that's going on too. So that's what makes it so tough to figure out as they move forward here is they got a lot of things to figure out as to why it went as poorly as it did this year. And I don't believe it's just the coach. Now, when it's been 56 games of this, Joe, is the coach part of it? Yeah. Like I don't think you can defend that anymore. Like he has not done a good job this year. There's no other way to slice it. Like he's not done a good job, and it may end up costing him his job at the end of the year.
Absolutely. Another big picture thing, which we can take this to previous coaches. As someone on the text line is pointing out, by the way, John Hines got blamed for anything, and now John Hines doing all right with the Wild.
Yeah.
So what's that mean? But also, look at not that Ellie Tolvin set the world on fire, but he goes somewhere else. It's better for him. Tomasino goes somewhere else. Better for like there have been a lot of guys who have been underwhelming here, come in under their supposed talent level, and then go somewhere else and look better. Why is that?
Yeah, it's something you got to get to the bottom of. I don't know what the answer to that is. And it's not every time, but it has happened a lot recently. Look, even guys coming in, right? Like I gave some grace for this group for a while. Like I thought even heading into the year, it'd probably take Stamkos and Marchessault some time to figure things out. Stamkos a year ago, Joe, was a 40-goal scorer and an 80-point player, and he's been a 40-goal scorer basically his entire career, and he's just not going to approach that this year. Like, do I believe that Steven Stamkos has fallen off that sharply in 1 year? No, I don't. So you got to get that part of it figured out somehow, some way as you move forward. I don't know how you do it. I don't know if it's as simple as the coach, but that's where they're at the end of this season. That's going to do it for us today here on the program. We'll be back 6 a.m. tomorrow. Kuharski will be with us tomorrow on the show. Everybody have a great rest of your day. Chasing Big Joe coming up next. You're listening to 102.5, 106.3 The Game.